To come to this session?
What do you say?
Why did you choose to come for this session?
Which decision?
Session. This, yes. Yes.
Yeah, I came here for another purpose. You will see it in the future.
Okay, I will see it in the future. Honorable?
I came here because I think that internet is a right, should be accessible to anyone with or without disability. And my concern when I was coming, usually use mobile money, but I was thinking how blind people can use mobile money. If they have to use a phone with code, how does blind people use mobile money? I don't know. And how can we make it accessible to them? Not only mobile money, but technology in general.
Have you seen any blind person in this room? Okay, you will talk to him or her and find out how they use mobile money. But you said something about disability. What is disability?
I just wanted to say a reason why I chose this session is because oftentimes the issues of persons with disabilities left out in digital rights and freedom of expression online.
Okay, you've said so many things. First, I want to understand disability.
I think disability for me is the lack of the ability to do something specific. When someone doesn't have any ability to do this or this, that person is disabled.
Anybody else wants to offer something else?
Why I'm here?
No, disability. Okay, why you are here?
Okay. I run a training center, and of recent, we are trying to train master trainers to train persons with disability. We do a lot of ICT trainings, so it's quite interesting to know how to balance ICT and disabilities. So that's why I'm here.
Anybody knows what disability is or does not know what disability is? Or a person with disability? Doctor?
Disability takes a combination of issues. One, you will be having an impairment, whether physical, sensory, or mental. But in addition to that impairment, you also face social barriers, environmental barriers, because of the way society has been configured. If you have an impairment and you don't suffer any discrimination, that is now a social barrier. If you don't suffer any discrimination, it will be debatable whether you have a disability or not. If you are having an impairment, but you have all the technology that you can use to navigate or to maneuver through the environment without any difficulties, again, it will become a little bit questionable whether you have a disability. So it's not really the inability to do something, because between me and that gentleman who said that we can do exactly the same things, or I can even do it better than him, but I'm classified as a person with a disability simply because of those things that I'm mentioning. Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor. So this session is going to try to make a connection between ICTs and disability. I think one more contribution, then we start officially.
Hi, my name is Medi Kamedi. I come from Kenya, and I have a concern. I don't agree with the word disability from my view that when you call me a disabled person, the first instance, the word disarm me from my capabilities, because I do understand there are so many ways that have been forged where if you can't do something, you'll use an alternative to achieve. If you can't see, we have mechanisms that can enable you to see. So if you tell me that I'm disabled, I think for the correctness, the word disability, it's not good enough, because every time you use it, it's like you are disarming me on my capabilities. Thank you.
Thank you. So this is becoming very interesting. Okay.
I am a person with disability, and I'm not ashamed. You see, my brother Abdul earlier on mentioned that disability is an evolving concept. And that means that there are key words which he underlined. One, impairment. So when you are looking at what we are talking about is impairment, is what you are talking about things like activity limitation. You cannot see, you cannot hear, you cannot remember, you cannot walk. That's physical, that's impairment. That's not what you're talking about as disability. A combination of that and the environment where we are living in, where digital barriers had been put, whereby physical steps, technological, those barriers coupled with now the third element, attitude, whereby because of my combination, there is a negative attitude. Even before I speak, I walk into the bank and there's already an attitude that I'm begging and not coming to write a check of $100 million in francs. So as you'll come to see, all these layers is what constitutes to disability. Of course, there are even those who are cancer survivors. They have invisible impairment. You cannot say that this person, but because of these different layers, that's what makes them a person with disability. Thank you.
Thank you. I was going to quote some writing which says exactly the same thing, so I'm not going to quote it. Now, this is a session where we are going to discuss what's the relationship and how can we use ICTs to reduce on the barriers that persons with physical disabilities face to live a meaningful life and participate equally in all the aspects of life that, quote unquote, normal people enjoy. Before we begin that discussion, let me introduce my panelists. I have Mr. Awoke from Together, then Brownen from Small Media, Judy Okite from Nairobi, Kenya, and Dr. Abdul Buusulwa from Uganda. We shall be discussing some of those issues, and there will be two main questions we shall be trying to answer. One, what are the key barriers, specifically to ICTs, that persons with disability face in trying to live a quote unquote a normal life, but also what should be the priority areas that we as special people in this room should focus on, put our energies on, to make sure that the ICTs that others enjoy are accessible to persons with physical disabilities. To start us off, we have a small exercise. I'll give Mr. Walker to explain how the exercise is going to run.
Okay, thank you. We are not going to perform the exercise now. I will directly give the mic for my colleague Bronon so that we can present something for you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm Bronwyn. I'm the Director of Global Programs at Small Media, and I'm also one of the co-founders of Data for Change. And we run data visualization sprints, which I'll talk more about in a minute. But on the screen behind me is a long horizontal line. It's mostly flat. In the last quarter of it, it goes from being flat to spiking up. And on the left-hand side, it says 1990. And on the right-hand side, it says 2017. What do you think this trend might be showing? It's a data visualization, and we have people in this room who can't see that. My job as a person who expresses data visually is inaccessible and exclusive to many others. But what we're seeing with this long, horizontally flat line from 1990 and a sharp spike coming up to 2017 is the rapid rise of the internet in Ethiopia. But visually impaired people are being shut out, in part due to insufficient ICT training, in part due to limited access to tools like screen readers, and in part due to simply the inaccessible nature of many websites. And so I'd like to ask Awoke to tell us a little bit about the work that him and his colleagues do at Together.
Okay, thank you so much, Bruno. I am Awoke Dagnew from Together. I'm Plan Monitoring and Evaluation Officer in that organization. So, as has been introduced by Bruno, we are working on persons with visual impairment in Ethiopia. We are trying to empower them, those persons with visual impairment, by doing something about those challenges that has been already mentioned by Bruno. So, since we began operation in 2012, our mission has been to empower persons with visual impairment by providing them with free internet service in our office and online tools and libraries for reading and learning purposes. We have a resource center in Together, and if some of you know the Central Braille Library in Addis Ababa, we are managing also that resource center, and we are providing online tools, libraries like Braille books, reading materials, and free internet services for persons with visual impairment. There are also educational materials in Braille and audio formats. In Together, there is an audio book production center in our office. We are transcribing some of the hard texts to the soft one to make them digitalized and accessible for persons with visual impairment. And ultimately, our aim is to empower persons with visual impairment in Ethiopia. This is one of our right holders in Together. She is called Kalkidan, and she, at one moment, she said, I want blind students like me to have the option to choose what they want to study. As you know, like their sighted peers. As you know, in Ethiopia, especially in most developing countries and in most of the nations in Africa, persons with visual impairment are lacking, or they are not equally participating in different curriculums like mathematics, ICT, physics, and some other courses which are not accessible for persons with visual impairment and in general for persons with disabilities. So our aim is finally to make persons with visual impairment actively involved in each and every curriculum, so that they can be benefited and they can use their full potential, so that they can be active and productive members of the society. So here are our beneficiaries exercising the information technology and basic computer skill trainings in our premises. So we wanted to learn more about what people with visual impairments feel as a collective and what they want, what they need, was our question at the beginning of our project with Data for Change and Small Media Foundation. So we ran a survey and we asked them what they feel about some of the questions that we pose on them. So some of the answers, the survey results revealed that one of the questions was, are you able to participate in ICT lessons at school? So 51% of the respondents said that no, they are not participating in information communication technology. In fact, even for 49% of them, maybe the answer seems like yes, but it is not really, because in primary and secondary educations, persons with visual impairment in Ethiopia are not participating in ICT lessons. They are not attending, or they are not being educated for information communication technology courses like basic computer and like those of their sighted peers. So we posed the second questions for persons with visual impairment for our respondents. What are your ambitions for the future? What you would like to be? From the respondent, 61 says that they wanted to become lawyers, and 34 want us to become teachers, and 19 entrepreneurs, 11 social workers, and 6 out of the total respondents say that they wanted to set up a charity organization so that they can help some of the most marginalized community members. So we also try to know about their feeling for the question, what is the single most important thing that would make it easier for you to fully engage with information communication technology. 41% of the respondents said that accessible applications are our demands, our basic needs, and that the single most important thing that we demand. So the summary of the finding looks like this. Visually impaired people face social, economic, and now digital exclusion, which is most of our digital tools, websites, computers, and other any electronic materials are excluding persons with visual impairment and those of persons with disabilities. They are also excluded from the most works of social and economic living conditions. As a result, they are missing out on their huge potential to contribute to Ethiopians' development, because they are excluded from the most works of the social, economic, and the digital exclusion one, so they are not contributing their full potential for the development of the nation. The thing that would help them to realize their full potential is a more accessible internet, website, and other digital tools. So my colleague Bronon will continue from this. Thank you.
So as I mentioned, Data for Change is actually, well, it is a London-based non-profit. This is our team. And what we do is we connect civil society organizations and experts like Awoke with some of the best global and regional professionals in data, design, tech, and journalism. We organize events around the world, 5-day sprints. And when we first met, Awoke and Wubakal from Together was in Nairobi in May this year. For that particular event, the theme was digital rights and internet freedom. We had 139 civil society organizations from the region apply for just 4 available slots. When we saw the application come in from Awoke and Wubakal, it was one of 2 that we received on accessibility and technology issues. And I think we're all in this room because we understand that as a community we need to do a better job. So it was a no-brainer for us. We had to have them there. And so on the screen behind me now is a picture of the team that we put together for them in Nairobi. They had 6 creatives, one from Egypt, one from Ethiopia, one from Germany, one from Tanzania, and one from the UK. And in just 5 days, their team came up with a campaign designed to empower people with visual impairments in Ethiopia. The Data for Change process is collaborative. We're all in the same room together. We're all working on the issue together. It's about co-creation and collaboration. And for us at Data for Change, it's really important to have either beneficiaries in the room or representatives of beneficiary groups. And that's why it's so important for this to be a process with the civil society organization. So their team came up with 2 pretty ambitious goals. One, to create an accessible and educational data-driven experience for visually impaired people. Now remember, most of the creatives in the room come from a data visualization background, and they were now facing a challenge of how to create a data visualization for a person who may not be able to see it. And they also wanted to inspire web developers, teachers, and policymakers to champion greater digital inclusion. So, over the course of the 5 days, they looked at how they would tell this story. Whose point of view would it be told from? They used the data that Together had collected, along with Royal National Institute for the Blind data, World Bank data, and at the end of each day, they would check in and reiterate on the process. They got very hands-on with recording audio. So on the screen behind me at the moment is a picture of Wubakal from Together and Ella, who's a data journalist in the United Kingdom, sitting in a quiet space together, recording the script for their project. And they also experimented with different ways of making data seen. So they used pitch or sound, volume, texture, different instruments, different durations, different scales and different speed of music to try and convey the same things that they were used to expressing in a graphic design format. And then they would test it. So they would play the audio track to other participants in the event and ask them to draw what they thought that they heard. And so after the 5 days in Nairobi, we secured a small amount of additional grant funding to produce a campaign called Hear the Blind Spot. And it is both a web and a live experience. And so we have something special in store for you today.
Okay, thank you. So I think you have some stuffs behind on your chairs. So you can, now I will be taking you through some live performance sessions. So could you please put on the eye masks on your eye and then look for what is going on after that? Everyone, please, in the room, put on the eye mask on your eye. Okay, hurry please.
Hear the Blind Spot. Hi, I am Desta, and I love playing the flute. Let me tell you about my country, Ethiopia, through music. Ethiopia has the second largest population in the whole of Africa. People here are living 20 years longer than they were in 1990, the year I was born. Hear how life expectancy has grown from 47 years to 66 years. This is all thanks to public health programs that lead to huge reductions in child mortality, malaria, and HIV. Other good things are happening too. Our economy is growing fast. People now earn $790 each year on average. Incomes have grown to sound like this in my lifetime. More kids are staying in primary schools. No one was using the internet in 1990, but that all changed in 2012. Today, nearly 1 in 5 Ethiopians are online. This has already transformed how we learn and communicate. But not everyone is benefiting. More than 850,000 Ethiopians are completely blind, while 3.5 million are partially sighted. That includes me. I am the blind spot. Along with millions of others like me, we are being left behind. We need websites built with visually impaired people in mind and digital tools that work in our language, local language. The team at Together believe digital inclusion is a fundamental human right. Do you? If you would like to support Together, please donate.
Okay, thank you. Can you put off? These are, wait. They are our live performance players. Please give me your hand for them.
So this is a live experience that can be performed in schools. It can be performed on the radio. It's an accessible website that's available in both English and Amharic at heartheblindspot.org. I don't think the audio was on there. It's mobile friendly. It's designed with screen reader users in mind, with clean navigation, and all buttons and images have alt tags. It's also a black and white website with large typeface. And it also includes a donation functionality for people to be able to support Together's really important work. And that goes directly to Together's Ethiopian bank account, and actually even getting that set up was a challenge, but we found an amazing organization called Give and Gain that was able to facilitate those. Social sharing, and of course, about Together. The script is available to download in Braille, Amharic, and English, and our script reader today was reading the Braille version. And live performance packs of the sheet music are downloadable and printable as well. So we want Hear the Blind Spot to bring sighted and non-sighted people together. Digital exclusion is a real problem, and to be able to share the same immersive experience together can help to break down that social stigma and isolation. And we think that this has a huge potential to reach people across Ethiopia, and we're looking forward to support Together to do that. Digital inclusion is a fundamental human right, and if you agree, we would love if you can share Desta's story online. Thank you very much.
Another round of applause for the presentation. How many of us wished they didn't have those blinds when the performance was going on? How many of us wished they didn't have to cover their eyes when the performance was going on? Okay. And when you were told to remove the blind, what happened? Within a second, it was gone and you could see again. For some people, it is a lifetime of not being able to see the beautiful performances, but just to use their imagination to enjoy. So what must we do? I want to welcome my panel. Dr. Abdul, kindly join the panel. So while the performance and presentation focused a bit major on visual impairment, we have so many types of disabilities that we experience. And we meet so many people with very many disabilities, types of disabilities. So our session here is to, some of the challenges have been identified and some solutions have been talked about. I want to ask my panelists, Judy, some of these challenges, I think you face them or you know people who face them in your organization and the work that you do. I don't want us to repeat them, but first is when you are coming for this conference, what things do you think the organizers could have done better to make it easier for you to participate? We want to start from there before we go to the external people.
Thank you, Paul. My name is Judy Okite. I work with the Association for Accessibility and Equality. I come from Nairobi, Kenya. What we do on a day-to-day is we do advocacy for accessibility offline and online. When we say offline, we mean the physical environment. How accessible is the physical environment for each and every person to be able to achieve that which they want to do. When we talk about online, we are talking about content that has been touched widely. How accessible is that content for the person with disability? What could have been done for me? I think you guys went way out of your way to make me as comfortable as possible. But there are a few challenges. There is the challenge of the room, whether the room works. All of us know that when you go to your room, it's meant to be your private area. When you have to include or call somebody else to help you do something very minimal, then it takes away your rights. It takes away your privacy. So that one was a challenge. It is a challenge. It's not something that they can sort out now, but we have discussed that please, they work on it so that the next person who comes will not have that challenge. The other thing that is a challenge, the reason why we are not on the stage is because it's not accessible for us. Yes, we also wanted to be high up here, please. Yes, you will find in many rooms, the platforms are not accessible. I'm not sure whether they do not expect a person with disability to be making their presentation, or they don't expect them to go up there, or whether it's ignorance. I'm not sure about that, but I wish that it would start from that. Even if a person with disability is not going to make a presentation, but let it be accessible. Thank you.
I wanted to hear that because in our planning, we asked the organizers to put accessible and a ramp. So I think we are going to take that recording to them and we'll reduce on our payment to them. Dr. Abdul.
The same question? Yes. I've been attending a number of sessions today, and there have been a lot of PowerPoint presentations. I don't have even a single word that I've picked from those presentations, apart from hearing the voice. And you know, when you're presenting with the PowerPoint, you assume that people are seeing what you are presenting. So you don't have to labor to say everything. So just imagine all those gaps in between there have not been filled for me. So that's the bit that is most important. But also, you know, you chose a very complicated place. Even with a sighted guide, we have been getting lost so many times to go to the different venues that we're supposed to reach for sessions, for breaks and all that. So that's where the challenge is for me as a visually impaired person.
Okay, thank you. I'm hoping tomorrow we shall address some of those challenges, because if we are to increase accessibility for persons with disability, a lot of times we need to start, the change begins with us and not always looking outside of the house. So I'm not sure how much we shall do, but we shall try to make sure tomorrow all the sessions are accessible and provide as much information as possible. Then, so in Kenya, coming back to you, Judy, what are the biggest challenges that people with disabilities face to access ICTs?
My goodness, where do I start? From everywhere.
You could choose.
Oh, wow, from everywhere. In Kenya, we have very good policies. They cover persons with disabilities very elaborately. But the problem comes when it comes to implementation. Everybody stays away when it comes to implementation. When you try to raise an issue, you become a noisemaker, and everyone begins to avoid you. Unfortunately, time has come that we have to make people uncomfortable. Because unless we fight for ourselves, we've seen that the able-bodied will not do it for us. Unless the shoe pinches you, you will not be able to know how far. We've had a wonderful demonstration, and I think probably most of us were peeping to check whether the person who was sitting in front was playing the flute or not. That is the challenge that the person with a visual disability have to face every day. So when it comes to Kenya, I know the other day somebody was talking about money, mobile money. Yeah, we have the telecom company Safaricom that have built an application for the persons who are blind, that they can be able to do that. But for the longest time, they will have to get assistance. And you'll have to get somebody whom you can trust. So if you tell them, please send to Awoke 500, they'll have to trust that you're sending to Awoke 500. And you're not sending another 500 to yourself. The challenge remains that though Safaricom has done that, it means that the persons who are blind are stuck with Safaricom. What if I wanted to use telecom? What if I wanted to use Airtel? Those are the questions that we are posing to the Communication Authority. Is it all right? Are we able to choose which telecom company we are going to use? Or are we stuck because these people are more or less aligned towards our end? When it comes to the television, to the news, it is actually in the ICT law that it should be translated. Unfortunately, because most of the broadcasting are private, then they choose whether they will or whether they will not. For those who have, there's a very small space that has been given to the person who is doing sign language. So for those of my friends who have a hearing problem, even seeing that person making those signage become a problem. So those are the challenges that we are going through. When it comes to the physical, I cannot even begin. As early as a building that was brought up in early 2019, it still doesn't have a ramp. So for the longest time, there was the complaint of the old buildings and how to adjust them. But now we still find that there are very new buildings that are coming up, and they still do not have the ramp, and they still do not have an accessible washroom. So there's a lot that is happening. People are moving forward, but we are leaving a big chunk of the society behind. I'm not sure at what point we are planning to come back for them. But we are not going to wait for people to come back for us. We are coming forward. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Kindly pass the microphone to Dr. Abdul. Doctor, I saw you with a phone.
Yes.
If I needed to buy one that can be used by a person with the visual impairment, how much would I have to part with?
If you want to use that particular type of phone, you need about $800. So it is as expensive as that. That's an iPhone. It has a speech device in it, and it can speak, at least for a person with visual impairment, you'll be able to use. And it has a number of other accessible features for the different disabilities. The only problem is that it is very expensive. So somebody in the rural area, somebody who doesn't have a job, somebody who is unlucky not to live in a well-to-do family will not be able to afford such a phone, such an expensive phone. So that's the challenge you will get.
Are there some that are cheaper, or that's the cheapest?
And if you want a cheaper phone of that same type, then you'll have to go for second hand. Maybe you'll get an iPhone 5 at around maybe 800,000 in Uganda. That's for international consideration. That's about $200, I think. That would be fairly cheaper. But even then, you'll find that many people don't have the $200 in order to buy that kind of phone. Also, it depends on the type of work or type of use you want to put that phone. If you just wanting to make calls, then you don't have to buy the type of phone that I'm talking about. You'll have to buy the one with the buttons, and you will be able to make calls, but still you will not be able to read messages, especially from WhatsApp, because we normally get so many of those. You won't be able to read by yourself. So if your girlfriend sends you a WhatsApp message thinking that you read it, then you have to tell somebody else to read it for you, and you never know what may happen. The girlfriend may be taken away or something like that. Then, of course, even that is not very simple, but I don't know whether people here still have those keypad phones. The number 5 is the magic number on that phone. It has some roughness, which is different from other keys, and you need to master that kind of feature in order to navigate and use all the other numbers or the other keys on that phone, because that's the central key which can help you to do some simple texting, to pick some numbers that you have memorized in your head and you dial them, and a few other things. But if you want the kind of phone that I was talking about, the one that I use, then that is very expensive.
Thank you very much, Dr. That explains it. So what Judy and Dr. have said, really, we have, most countries actually have the good laws which recognize and define persons with disability. The problem is the implementation. Our telecommunication players, I think Safaricom is doing it because they want to target persons with disability as a market. So there is persons with disability are benefiting, but probably the intention was not really to provide accessibility, but to increase on their market share. And then, Doctor, you talked about the cost of the gadgets that we need. So, okay, if I'm not the government, so I don't pass laws, I'm not in charge of implementing the laws. I am not a trader, so I don't determine the cost of the fund, or I'm not a developer. What do you think, I can do to improve your accessibility to ICTs, or the people you work with, to have more access to ICTs? I am not government, I am not a trader, I'm just me.
Okay. Thank you. I simply let you ask you to understand the situation in the show of mine. One of the major problems that comes to my mind when I thought like persons with disabilities is like we forgot them. Most of the times the major problems comes from our attitude and our simply imagination toward the persons with disabilities, especially for those persons with visual impairment. Some of the major problems are on the policymakers, law formulators, and some other people who are at the top of the laws and the regulatory bodies. But there are also some other problems which are manifesting some sort of marginalization and exclusion of persons with disabilities on the community level even. It is not only the problem of officials or any government authority only. Rather, every situation is discriminating persons with disabilities to fully utilize their potential so that they can be productive and active members of the society. So if you have no any power to do something with regard to that, but I will beg you how you feel in the show of mine, how persons with disabilities are excluded from the most walks of life, how they are excluded from the education, the economy, and the digital tools. So this will be my first impression on you.
Thank you. And the people in the room, we have some academia, we have some advocates, and I think I've seen some donors.
Merci.
What do you want them to do for us?
Okay, I
will suggest for the academia, researchers, and anyone who is donor one, I suggest that the first thing is everyone should understand the situation of persons with disabilities, how they are suffering from the exclusions that persons with disabilities are experiencing in their life. The first thing they should have to understand or clearly examine how persons with disabilities are suffering from. Everyone should have to understand the extent of the situation by asking them some viable and realistic questions and figure out how the challenges should have to be solved. The other most important thing is that we all need to have, we have to mainstream persons with disabilities in our academic, in our funding programs, in our design of projects and some other stuff that we can do to empower persons with disabilities. So anyone from the sector of the academic or maybe from the side of donors or any other institutions must have to understand the situation and try to allocate the most, try to allocate budget for managing the activities, the programs, or the projects that can empower persons with disabilities and so that they can fully participate in the digital development and any other development endeavor of the community. So this will be one of my recommendations so that we can solve, if we have to solve or minimize the problems that persons with disabilities are suffering from.
Thank you. Do we have any policymakers within the room?
Des forces armées et tout
Why
ça,
is it so difficult to implement some of the laws that we make? In Africa, we have very good laws.
Les forces armées, et donc, du coup, il fallait
to
mettre
implement
une
the
loi
laws,
pour contrôler un peu les contenus.
especially you can say in our country first we don't have such a law.
Quelle est la force
Not yet.
de tous ces activistes
We
au
hope
Burkina
that
pour que
we will
ça puisse changer,
reach
pour
that
que l'État
level
puisse
of
comprendre
first
qu'on ne
having
change pas,
those
on ne
laws
peut
in
pas.
place.
En fait,
That's
c'est un peu comme M. Diop disait.
very good step.
Pour moi, c'est comme si on
But I
disait
hope that we will
qu'il y a
reach
beaucoup
that
de
step
voleurs
since we have a
dans un
minister
pays.
specific
Donc, du coup, on arrête d'être
focused
riche
on the
parce qu'il y a des
issue
voleurs.
of disability.
Est-ce que la solution, c'est
people
à ce
with
niveau ou est-ce que
disability,
c'est comment on essaie
but
de
the implementation
travailler de telle sorte qu'il y ait
goes
moins
with
de voleurs
sometime with cost.
en résolvant le problème
If
du côté des
you
voleurs
have to
ou est-ce qu'il faut résoudre le
enforce
problème du côté de ceux qui ont envie d'être
buildings
riches?
to have
Moi, en fait, c'est
to be
je pose des
accessible
questions pour ceux qui ont l'expérience pour le
to person
Cameroun et tout
with
ça.
a
Comment
disability.
vous arrivez à
There's
mettre
some
en
cost
place des mécanismes
that
pour
will
pouvoir
go with
avancer
that.
parce que je vois
If
que
you
chez
have to
nous, par
enforce
exemple, il y a comme
telecom
on est tous
to
paralysés.
be also accessible to people with disability, there's some cost. So the issue is to know how we share the cost between the entrepreneur who are just looking for money, for benefits, and the government who also have also to protect the rights of all the people. They have to see how to share the cost. We cannot. The government is not able just to shift the cost to the private sector. They have also to see how they can encourage those private sector, either in telecom, the construction company, maybe with some incentive tax or I don't know what. But the major issue on implementing those kind of laws, not only for the to deal with accessibility, but any other law that have cost impact is the problem of who will take care of the money to finance those things. There's other law like accessibility, like free education. Many countries in Africa have also free education in the constitution, but at the end we have to pay for education. So the problem is on the cost. And I think we also have to see how we can think about the financial part of making things happen. Like in the law for the telecom, how can we make those, how can we get money to support the telecom to make their services accessible? How can we support the construction company to make buildings also accessible? The most things is the cost. There may be also other things like the bureaucracy.
We need to understand that
sometimes we are rushing to make the law, but there's no one to make a follow-up of that law. Once it is there, but there's no one who is there to implement that law. There's also a problem of ownership of that law,
to try to block anything
and accountability
on internet.
In case if that law is not implemented, what will be the
so the second point is
who will
the
be responsible?
Responsibility.
There's
so
nothing in the law for that. They say you have to do this and this and this, but there's nothing which say if this is not done. But if they say each hotel have to be
bad
to
thing on
have
internet,
a
telling
washroom
trust
accessible
or
for
insulting
person
people.
of disability.
So this is about
If not,
responsibility
there's a
of people.
penalty.
So,
There they will do
and
that.
Civil society
But if there's no
organizations,
that
media
kind of
organizations, and even the state
I don't
has
know.
to educate people so they can have a
that
good
can
behavior,
or in the
so
law,
they can know their,
they say, okay, they asked me to do
rights,
something,
and so
but
can
they didn't
also
give
know
me
what are
money,
their digital
so
duty.
they have
This
to
is
come and do
extremely
it
important.
themselves.
So
but if you say,
my,
if you don't do this, you will have to pay money. And
question
that will also
now
help.
are
So
the first one
the law
is,
should be there. The
you know, our
ownership
leaders are
who have
actually,
to enforce that law and
inspiring
how to
each other
enforce.
in doing bad
Without
things.
that part,
By this,
a
I want
law
to talk
can
about
just be
this,
there, but it will never
so-called
be
anti-terrorism
implemented.
law.
Thank you.
I think
Honorable
it starts
for-
here from Ethiopia, then
Is
we got
Honorable
anti-terrorism
Member
law
Parliament from
in Cameroon, in Benin, in Mali. So
I would like to add to
I
what
just
he
want
said.
to understand if for those
while the
who
laws are
already
being
are
drafted,
working on
we
this
should also
issue,
include
if
persons with
do you think that
disabilities
those
amongst the people who are
anti-terrorism
drafting
law
the
are
laws. The other thing is
are profitable for your countries?
The other thing
Because
is
from our
in
perspective, I think it's
our
not, but
rules
I
of
just want to know
engagement,
what is your
in our
point of view.
employment
The question
rules,
is for all
I
the
think
panelists.
that in Africa
And the
we
second
should-
point is,
we should
the
have
second question
laws
is
that
about
enforce
the
that every
link between
organization should
private
employ
company
persons with
in terms of
disabilities.
internet.
If
Very
they're within your
recently
system, automatically,
in
you know,
Chad, I think it was in
you
Chad.
would be like if you
The
employ
telecommunication
persons with disabilities
organization,
in this
company
hotel,
just
you would naturally
keep
know
blocking some
there should be a
specific
tramp,
platform because the government
the
wants
hotel
it.
rooms should also
So how
be
do you
set
deal with this kind of
to, you
issue?
know,
Because the problem is not
comfortable
just
for
only the government. Okay, the government said block it, but the private sector
Thank you.
also. Maybe
I
you can
agree
make
with
pressure
what,
on
the previous
private
speakers
sector.
have
So
said,
this is my
but I believe
statement.
that,
My last question
awareness,
is about the
from
solidarity
all of us,
between
who have
between
the power to do something
activists.
Is also
So
critical, and I
how
would like to explain that
activists
with some
are
experience,
are
personal experience.
collaborating
I was
together.
teaching at Addis Ababa
I'm
University,
asking this question because
and I
in
remember
Togo,
quite a while ago,
many activists
a
have been
blind
arrested
student,
when they just land.
continuing
I mean,
education
they
student
didn't
came
visit
and
the
said,
country. They
"I
just
want
the
to
aircraft
register
land, and when they
in
were
your computer
trying to
science,
get out, they just take them and
introduction
they
to computer
put
science
all of them in jail. So I just
said,
want to know
"Okay,
how
good."
do you
And
deal
I was
with all
positive
those
about
situations?
it because
Thank you very much.
I had an experience. I was in France, and our system administrator was a blind person. And for a year, I didn't even know that because I don't see him. He just gives me passwords and so on by email, and I didn't know it. So for me, it was quite okay. And then I went to the administration, and they said, no way. Blind people cannot study computer science. And it required a lot of perseverance, and I managed to register him. It required a lot of, more dedication, this voice, how is it called, the reading tool. And at the end, he got an A. So it was a very good way to do it. And I had another experience. I had a student who was on crutches, who had difficulty to walk, real difficulties, and they gave me a classroom in the second floor. And the student was suffering, and I went and said, you have to change my room. And they say, just for one student? And so these are not things that we cannot do. We can do, but we should all be convinced. And I agree with the Honorable Member of Parliament that sometimes there should be, penalties if you don't do it. It is their right. It's not enough to write it in our constitution, in our laws, etc. There should be penalties if we don't do it. And every single person has the power to do something. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I think in the digital age, just like in the stone and concrete age, the challenge has been attitude. Widespread, sincere ignorance. People that do not know a thing about inclusion, not because they hate persons with disabilities, but because they sincerely do not know. We, for example, have had laws since time immemorial, say in Uganda, where building owners are required to put ramps. And an investor will tell you, but Ever since I put up this building, I've seen only one wheelchair, and that has been 5 years. So why am I going to invest so much money to put up a ramp, and there's going to be 1 or 2 wheelchairs over the next 5 years? And this person needs to know that he probably has never seen a wheelchair because there's no ramp in the first place. So in the digital era too, we need to focus on mindset change. We need to focus on creating awareness. If Thomas here, for example, has a software, a screen reader, but I send him a document that is largely inaccessible, then I'm not being helpful. Meaning accessibility has got to go beyond design, beyond the designers and creators. We need to look at, for example, accessible document design. If Thomas has a screen reader, but I sent him a document that is not consistent in form of navigation, a document that has, say, more tables as opposed to columns, which would be easier to navigate, a document where I drew tables as opposed to inserting them, then it becomes harder. So at the end of the day, you're going to have some of the best digital spaces out there, but as long as you have the terrible mindsets, just like we had in the physical age, then you're still going to have a lot of accessibility challenges. Finally, we need to look at affordability. Accessible, affordable, assistive devices, digital devices could be, I saw they were talking about schools, could be digital braille printers, it could be digital hearing aids. But ask yourself how much a good hearing aid with telecoil features costs anywhere in Africa. It could go for up to about $2,000 US. So why aren't we encouraging local innovation? Why aren't we encouraging local innovation in accessible digital, rather affordable digital devices for persons with disabilities? Why aren't we including them in the design process? Aside from skilling persons with disabilities with digital competencies, why aren't we including them in the design process? Why aren't we designing with them as opposed to designing for them? So that's what I would like to say. It is primarily an attitude issue, and we need to fight against that. Thank you.
Ask so many questions. Why? Anybody wants to answer them? I'll come to you, Thomas.
Thank you. I know he's posed a lot of questions, but at the same time, let me start by confirming that whereas the legal frameworks across the continent encourages that both public and private sector be inclusive. I think we have seen snippets of that in terms of inclusion within political governance, for example. We have seen when you go to a good number of countries and you go to, I'm just giving an example, you go to a department where there's a queue, you'll get a token and you'll be hearing number 1305. We are beginning to see, in terms of governance, in terms of government service delivery, building universal design so that it's not just somebody who's got low vision, who's got hearing impairment, or somebody who might just not be attentive, but through the different multimedia that has been built into the different displays, we are beginning to see inclusion within other levels of governance. But one area which I think for data to be inclusive within our society, I think we would see more of private partnership, private-public partnerships. I think it's that frontier where we are seeing MTN, Vodacom, and the ministry line ministry in South Africa, for example, or in Kenya, or I go to Nigeria, that collaboration has yielded applications. And not just apps which are open source apps, where you don't have to design. And that's the new frontier. The other level where we are beginning to see inclusive data and data participation is in where we are institutions of excellence, research institutions, having camps. I know with us at the African Union, last year and this year, we've had programs like Girls Can Code. And we are also beginning to see disabled people can code, camps. These are investments for opening up digital space and digital participation for persons with disability in the continent. So these are some of the opportunities that are opening up in terms of how do we ensure that, as Mohammed has said, that people with disability are not just consumers, but are active designers and users as well as marketers. Thank you.
Thank you.
My view, we have so many laws. Just the other day in Kenya, we have a proposal that if you want to form a WhatsApp group, you have to seek permission from Communication Authority of Kenya. Just imagine a family gathering, you're forming a WhatsApp group. Before forming a WhatsApp group, the admin, which probably is your father, has to seek permission from Communication Authority of Kenya. My point is, these laws are too much. The answer the answer lies on behavioral change. The way my brother said, is all about attitude. I like Ethiopia. If you read deep about Ethiopia history, you realize that in late 1880s, when the colonizers came in, Emperor Menelik II said to the colonizers, guys, we are here and you will not colonize us, just you can pass. So by that analogy, Ethiopia was not colonized. So did we have like laws which say that the emperor should not accept foreigners, or the emperor should not accept the country to be colonized? My assumption is no. It all lies to the moral and ethical values that are driven inherently within a human body. It's all about behavioral change. Let's start with your homes. When you are building your home, as much as you live in a home that everyone is perceived to be, you are all capable, or your functionality is in 100%. Let's build a home that is friendly to everyone who is a little bit different or has a special need away from you. The way one of the speakers said that there was a law that said once they build a ramp, they cited that there is only one person that used the ramp. That is, from perspective, if you interrogate that issue deep, you will realize that inherently he's not wired to accept the diversity of other people within his well-being. So the answer is, let's start with our homes. We should stop saying that we should enact more laws to care about this. Let's build another law to say about this, because laws are written words on a paper. Until someone acts on them, nothing will move. Thank you.
Okay, my name is Susan Dosi. I'm a member of parliament from Malawi. Most of the times we can make these laws, but the challenge with implementation comes in due to lack of technical and financial resources. As he has said, the person who was talking before me, laws are on the paper, but then to implement what has been put on that paper, it becomes difficult. And also, most of the times we think about people who are disabled, but they live in towns. We forget about the people who are in the villages. And we have a lot of people in the villages. What programs are being put in place to make sure that all those people with disabilities in the villages are also taken care of? Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Want to return the microphones to the panelists to make some concluding remarks reacting to the suggestions, but also any final thoughts on what needs to be done.
Thank you, and thank you for your contributions. I will begin by saying we all need to be intentional. To those of the academia, to the researchers, it is time that we started including inclusion from as early as possible. Most of my work that I do in Kenya, when you go to a university, to web developers, and they tell you inclusion, we didn't learn about accessibility. So when they are doing their websites, it's not going to be part of what they were taught to do. So this is what they are going to do later. And just like somebody said about costs, yes, it will cost you when you want to add the accessibility features to your website after developing it. It's cheaper when you include it at the point of its development. And the same works even with buildings. It's easier when you're putting up your building to put up a ramp as opposed to putting it up later because there is a need. For the researchers, let's try to find out the figures. More especially, we are also used to the 2 billion persons with disability globally. Let's find out how many of those come from Africa. Let's find out what is the age, what is the sex, so that in our way forward, even as we talk about innovation, how many people are we leaving out and how many people do we want to include? In the next 10 years, for those who are 10 years today, there will be 20 years tomorrow. We don't want them to be where we are today. I'll give you a little story, if I'm allowed. I'm grateful that I'm able to use internet, that I'm able to go online. I have been in this space for 10 years now. The very first time that I joined KICTANET. KICTANET is an ICT forum in Kenya. And every time there was a question, I would respond. And I was invited to one of their forums. And at the appearance, so there is, please, we need to introduce ourselves so that we can know who is here. And from the time that I came from outside, everybody was very willing to help me. Oh, can we help you get in? So where do you want to sit? Which was all very beautiful. But the point that I introduced myself, they were like, what? You are the one who's making that much noise. I'm like, yeah. Because they did not expect it to be a person with a disability. What am I saying? We upstairs, we have our brains, we have our minds. Give us that opportunity. What is it that you want us to do? Give us that opportunity and see us do it better than you can do it. I ran the West Africa IGF for 7 years from Kenya. I'm East African, but I was running the West Africa IGF from its inception. That is what we can do, given that opportunity. If you want to look at my limits, then you will not include me. Unfortunately, you'll be losing out on my mind, on my excellent mind. Thank you. For the funders, let's put a cap to our funding. I'm giving you this much if you're going to include the persons with disability in this area. We've seen, is it the World Bank that now has a cap, that there has to be, what do you call them? CSRs, what do you call that? What's the CSR? Corporate, yes. So now the World Bank has a cap on the social responsibility for them to give you that funding. So why don't we put that cap when it comes to the person with disability? When we saw the presentation up here, it is so exciting that these people want to be entrepreneurs. They want to be journalists, meaning that in every area where we are, there's a person with disability who wants to be part of that space. Open up that space for them. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I would suggest that the awareness raising program that we are trying to design for increasing awareness on about persons with disabilities and the problems that are associated with those challenges. I would suggest that we have to consider that capacitating persons with disabilities will also minimize or reduce the challenge that would affect or that would make some problems on the persons with disabilities. We have to empower them by providing them with some sort of trainings that will consider or concern how persons with disabilities use digital tools, how they will operate those materials, and how they are gonna be connected for the internet and will stay online, so that they can be going hand in hand with those sighted peers. So we have to think of capacity building trainings for the persons with disabilities on the one hand, and we have to increase awareness of the general community on the other, so that we can empower them and we can simply define and redefine the situation, so that we create an enabling environment for those persons with disabilities. That is how together Ethiopian Residents Charity Organization is working with persons with disabilities. Let me tell you something about it. We first try to analyze the situation from the perspective of those right holders, and we try to figure out how the challenges are affecting persons with disabilities, especially those our direct beneficiaries of persons with visual impairment. We try to understand that they are excluded from any digital services. The digital tools are not inclusive of persons with visual impairment. They are not trained to make use of the materials. So we try to provide them with some sort of computer and information communication technology trainings for a year, and then we deploy them in different schools so that they can empower children who are in primary schools. This is how we try to solve and reduce the magnitude of the problem that is hampering persons with disabilities from making use of ICT and other digital services. The other thing is we are creating or we are increasing awareness with regard to the potentials and the challenges that are affecting persons with disabilities. What are the major challenges that are affecting them, and what potentials do persons with disabilities had, so that they can be contributing for the development endeavor in the nation. We try to increase awareness, and we try to change the attitude positively so that they can be contributing, and the general community is complementing for persons with disabilities to be one of the actors in our development process. The other thing that we should have to consider is, especially for those policymakers, researchers, any officials and authoritative law enforcement bodies must have to focus on operationalizing the laws and the policies that targets persons with disabilities. In fact, as many of you said, there are laws, there are policies, there are different programs that are targeting persons with disabilities, but they are not getting into operationalized. They are not executed well. So we have to make sure that the policies and the laws are already in place and they have executed so that they are benefiting persons with disabilities. One thing that...
Thank you, Awoke. I want to stop you there and give an opportunity to...
Okay, thank you so much. Okay.
Thank you very much. I want to give you a business kind of thinking to go with. One, if you want to have a bigger market, then you should make your products, your services accessible to persons with disabilities. Because when you do that, then they'll very certainly be accessible to others without disabilities. Think of a ramp. Who doesn't want to use a ramp if it is well constructed? Think of an elevator. Who doesn't want to use it? So if you come to a hotel with all those facilities working, present, have been put there, then everybody want to use that place. Think of a website. If you're a service provider, you have an online shop, people are ordering, and your website is accessible to as many people as possible, including persons with disabilities, the others will find it much easier. So, if you make your products and services accessible, especially the ICT ones, and the physical environment, then it becomes very easy for them to be accessible to those that don't have disabilities. That is a tip. You can't think about it, you can't research on it, but that is how it is. Secondly, disability, God created disability to enable this world to develop. If you create or you think out solutions for people with disabilities, you'll be the best innovator in this world. Think about that screen reader that Thomas was talking about. That screen reader is a very complicated technology. But now, if I tell you how many other gadgets are using text-to-speech technology, you'll be surprised. Many of you have it in your GPS when you're moving. Don't you hear that voice? Many of you have started enjoying e-book readers. Hey, you want to read the Bible and then you put it in a machine and it reads for you. And you listen. Some of you, when you are moving on a plane, you put those headsets in the ears and you listen to those novels. That technology was primarily invented for blind people. But now it can be used by so many others, and they will even find it very useful. Maybe what you may not know, but I can tell you today, even when you go to a plane, the captain or the pilot doesn't have to read using eyes everything. Some of the information is given digitally using a screen reader, so that it's not obstructed from everything that it does. So you never know, that could have been responsible for reducing the accidents, the flight accidents. So many of you don't know that a ballpoint pen was primarily invented for people who have weak hands, who may not be able to use the fountain pen. But now, the fountain pen has lost the market. But in its invention, it was invented for people with disabilities. A cassette where you record information, primarily it was for people with disabilities, to record for them information. A typewriter, now you use a keyboard on your computers, but starting from the typewriter, it was invented for a blind woman in Italy somewhere there, a count. And because there was a friend who wanted to help this blind person to be writing her own letters, then they made those platens and she was able to write for herself. And now you see how far we have gone. So if you went on with that positive attitude, creating solutions for people's abilities, you never know how far they will take you. So if you want, disability is the area where innovation is still very virgin, very rich. It's just a matter of changing your attitudes. The telephone that you are using today, it was started in the Bell laboratories. Bell was inventing something that would help the deaf communicate to one another. See how far we have gone. Just go and read about that. You'll see that if we go home and start thinking, I have a brother here. He has this challenge. How can I help? You never know, you'll be inventing the next generation something for everybody to use. So for me, that's what I want to leave you with. You, the donors, if you're giving money to R&D, please think around disability solutions. For the researchers, that is still a virgin area. There's a lot that is coming out. We have speech technology, but then there's also sign language. How do we digitalize those images? How can you make artificial intelligence to interpret those signs? So that somebody can just sign, and just imagine how easy it would be by just making a small gesture and a robot understands what you are saying and does for you everything that you want. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Doctor. And I want to thank the team for your patience and contribution. Now, at CIPESA, we are trying to do some work around ICT and disabilities. We are in the process of developing some key indicators that can be used to rank the compliance of different countries in terms of how they are disability friendly. The indicators, again, we have had a lot of support and input from Judy and Dr. Abdul, who are experts in this field, but also in trying to make sure that the indicators are really relevant to the issues that we are trying to address. There are basically three areas that we are trying to measure in those indicators. One is the ICT accessibility, legal and policy framework. We are trying to see, first, does the country have the enabling laws talking about issues of disability? And in the formulation of those laws, were people or organizations of persons with disability involved? And how friendly are these so-called provisions? Number two, we are looking at the accessibility framework for public access. Does the government or the laws require that publicly accessible areas are disability friendly? Three, we are looking at the mobile communication sector. What kind of services are mobile communication service providers putting in place to ensure that persons with all types of disabilities have access to their services? Number four, we are looking at the television or broadcasting. The programs, as Judy and the panelists talked about, we have laws that require television stations to provide sign language interpreters for most of the programs. But if your country is lucky enough to have some of those stations, really it is not the size on the screen where the person who is doing sign language interpretation is projected is quite small, that again you need probably to move closer to the screen for you to be able to see the interpretation. Number five, we are looking at web accessibility. How convenient are the different websites by, first, of course, the government, but also us as CSOs and the other actors. For whom can the information on our website, is it accessible to the persons with disability? Then number six is the procurement policies. Do they require that if any government agency is to do procurement, they must put into considerations aspects that are friendly to persons with disability? So those indicators are still in the development stages. We have shared them with a number of key stakeholders, and we have gotten input from different persons, including the ITU, to see how best can they be used. And we hope that the resulting exercises, once the indicators are read and they have been applied, can be used for advocacy purposes. For example, you'll be able to understand, like country in Uganda, what laws do we have? Are they disability friendly? Were there involvement by persons with disability in conducting and formulating these laws? If not, then what can we do? Mobile telephone companies, I think for most of our laws, they require them to make provisions for persons with disability, but there is no implementation. And so identifying those opportunities. Recently, they were renewing the license for one of the biggest telephone mobile providers in Uganda. So there were a lot of inputs to ask them how have they performed in the 20 years they have been operating in the country. So could that be a requirement for government to ensure that for the license to be renewed, they must commit to provide services that are friendly and accessible to persons with disabilities. So those are indicators we're trying to develop, and once they are ready, we shall be sharing them. We are piloting them in 6 countries, and we are doing research to see how are mobile telephone companies performing in terms of providing services and for persons with disability. In my concluding remarks, I want to say that I think we have gotten a lot of and very rich input from the discussions on what we need to do. But number one is to change the attitude that we have towards issues and persons with disability. There, I think we shall have started our advocacy work, because for us to go to Parliament, we need also to understand and appreciate the issues before you can ask a honorable member of Parliament to pass legislations that are friendly to persons with disability. Then I think we need also to advocate for the removal of taxes on assistive devices, because this will greatly reduce on the cost of these devices. And as I think Judy said, we need to disaggregate data. Many of us don't know how many persons with disability we have in our countries. But that's a very good starting point for us to identify how many people of disabilities that we have in our given country, so that if we are now to design interventions, you know for how many people you are trying to intervene for. I'd like to thank you for your participation, and I've been requested to ask you to attend a welcoming cocktail, this evening at 6:30 in the foyer where we have been having our break teas. Thank you very much.